Rather than a speech today, I'd like to just chat with you and maybe come up with some ideas for your future. Things I went through. The automotive industry is absolutely huge, and I'm sure there's a lot of things you haven't thought of right now. It's probably centers on getting a job. But I started out like you did, and the thing that brought us all together today is auto shop. That's the thing that we're all talking about. That's the thing that we're proud of, and it's growing thanks to Gigi and the Peterson people. I wouldn't have been a hot rod if it hadn't been for auto shop. I went to auto shop at Fairplex High School, and I graduated in 1940, and at that time there was already a car culture growing up in Southern California. We began to see roasters on the street, and the lakes served as a perfect dyno, if you will, for the hot rodders. They could develop something during the week and then take it to El Mirage or Muroc and test it out. It was a great place to run, and I think that's why hot rodding grew up in California, quite frankly, because we had this incredible thing. It spread around the country more when we went to drag racing because you could get a quarter mile, but you couldn't get 5 miles of salt anywhere except Bonneville and a couple of miles at El Mirage. So those were great days, and like I said, I couldn't have done it without auto shop. I certainly couldn't have done my war career without auto shop. Without auto shop, I wouldn't have been able to pass the Air Corps test to be an airplane mechanic. It was not tough, but you had to know something, and luckily I did. I enlisted in 1942, and was very fortunate to get to work on some really interesting airplanes, which improved my career and taught me a lot more. I worked on the P-40 fighter plane. We were training Chinese cadets in those days. That was the famous Flying Tiger combat plane. I worked on a B-25 program where we were putting a 20-millimeter cannon on the B-25. And when it went off, the plane slowed down about 20 miles an hour. I ended up being on the B-17 crew. I was the engineer gunner. Everybody on the B-17 was a gunner except the pilots. It was a great career, and I enjoyed that. I was in 3.5 years, which gave me a lot of time to think about what I'd do at the end of the war. Once again, I couldn't have done what I did next without auto shop. I thought I would like to be in business for myself, and I thought if I did, I wanted to be a speed guy, and so I opened SoCal Speed Shop. I literally knew nothing about business, but I had to learn, and gradually I learned how to advertise, because in those days there was no place to advertise your shop. You could get a guy coming in off the street that would buy something from you, and you'd make a couple of bucks. It sounded like fun, but again, there was no place to reach people, so we created handbills, and we'd take them to all the races, midget races, all kinds of events, and put them on windshields. And that was my first taste of advertising, so I had to learn the hard way that way. Also, we created a brand, the SoCal Speed Shop and the SoCal Racing Team. So now we're in the promotion business, and we were very successful at it, luckily. We got on the cover of Hot Rod Magazine 5 times, so it was very successful in our promotion business. So I'm learning things all the time. Without auto shop, I would not have gotten in the movie business, because it was my knowledge of what I'd learned all along the way that enabled me to go out and start filming races. I retired from racing myself in 1954, and I had to do something on the weekends, no more drag racing to go to, so I started filming the drags, actually right here in Pomona. This is back in the 50s, and when drag racing was just starting out here. That was fun, and I eventually got fairly good at it. I started filming the Indianapolis 500, the Daytona 500, the Sebring 12-hour motorcycle racing. I really got heavy into it. And just a quick story. I was showing the Indianapolis 500 in auditoriums around Southern California. I'd come home, get the film developed, edit it, and then show it in an auditorium 3 days after the race. In those days, there was no television of the race. You had to listen to it on the radio. So people would kind of flock to this thing. Well, one night at the Santa Monica Civic, the projector motor blew. I had all kinds of extra bulbs and stuff, but no motors. So I called a friend in desperation that had a projector like I had, and he said he would bring it. He was in the valley. There was no freeways in those days, no 405. You had to go Sepulveda. I thought I'd probably have to refund all the money. I got up on the stage and I told everybody my problem, but I said, there is a projector on the way if you'll just be patient. While I'm talking, I looked in the audience and I saw this big imposing guy. It was Mr. 500, Andy Granatelli. So I called Andy up on the stage, and he took the mic. An hour later, he's telling stories about that year's Indy 500, and I'm getting the projector, and then I go down, and it was a hell of a job getting Andy off the stage. But nobody left. Nobody left. It was a great evening. And, if it hadn't been for Auto Shop, I wouldn't have had the knowledge that caused Pete Peterson to call me one day. The same Robert E. Peterson that's names on our building. He said he had a new project in mind and wondered if I would join him and work on it. It sounded exciting, and I had been doing the film thing quite a while, so to go to work for Pete was kind of exciting because that's where a lot of the action was in those days, all those magazines. So I went and we formed a special committee, and one of the people on that committee was Gigi Carey, who represents Peterson here tonight. So it's a small world. Anyhow, the project was interesting, and we put on our first event, and it was successful, barely. Gigi, who kept the books in those days, recently told me that Pete made $30 out of that show.
It was $900.
Oh, no, it couldn't have been $900. God, we'd have all gotten a raise.
It was a lot more to spend. We spent a lot more to get it there.
Anyhow, we ended up doing several of those things, and we named it the SEMA Show. And they're still doing it. Of course, it's up to 1 million square feet now. But anyhow, that's part of what we did, and it's part of what you guys might end up doing. I'm not going to talk you into opening a speed shop tomorrow, but maybe next week. Your parents just fainted. So now it's your turn. And it's your future, and it's your race to run. Gentlemen, start your engines.